how do I make sure that the whiskey that I'm buying isn't a fake? What's the price difference? Would I expect like duty free to have?
Recently, I saw Bombay duty free prices were more than the Mumbai retail prices. Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel where we dive deep into the world of whiskeys and spirits from around the globe. And in today's video, we are going to explore something that can be quite exciting yet daunting for most of us. How to build your own personal whiskey collection at home. But before we get started, please like and subscribe to our channel.
So Vinayak, I've actually been very fascinated with whiskey, but it's quite overwhelming when I want to start my own collection. So where should I start? How do I begin?
Your whiskey collection should be a reflection of your personality, your tastes, and your whiskey journey.
Also, what you should keep in mind is whiskey collection is not a one-time activity.
Yeah.
It's something that grows over a period of time. You may try something new and you may like it. So think of it as a lifelong task rather than just a one-time activity.
Right.
In fact, no one probably starts off with an agenda or a goal of building a whiskey collection. You buy one whiskey, then you buy one more whiskey if you like it, and then gradually, before you realize, you have more bottles than
You can think of.
And that's how so I don't think people actually start off with a goal, but that's why we are, to help in terms of guide you and others in terms of how and what are the small steps that you can take to ensure your whiskey collection is a reflection of who you are.
So I understand everything you said, but even for a beginner to start off, I believe there should be some amount of budget we should allot to starting a whiskey. Should I have a budget or not at all?
Yeah, I think it is important to have a budget because it is possible that initially you might end up picking up some whiskeys that you may not like. So I think $50 to $100 is something that you should have in mind when you're buying whiskeys. And what I also did, and even today, this is a rule that I follow for my own bar, is to have some of the basics in place, like have a good blended Scotch whiskey, like a Chivas 12 or a 15. Have a good Indian whiskey in your bar. I would possibly have a Indri Trini or something from Paul John, maybe the Paul John Bold. Have a good single malt Scotch whiskey like a Dalmore, a good bourbon. See, what it does is, one, at a very basic level, you have a lot of variety. So if you're hosting people over, someone wants to have neat, they can have it neat. Someone wants to make a cocktail out of it, they can do that as well. And then you don't always have to open a new bottle that you may want to save for yourself. So it's always important to kind of have some of these whiskeys, always in your bar. So I think I would possibly start with that when I'm starting to build my collection.
Got it.
I think also, while yes, budget is important when you're looking at building your whiskey collection, especially when you're starting off, you don't want to go overboard because whiskeys can start from like 5,000 rupees and go up to like 50 lakh. So there is no ceiling, but what I would also suggest is you should hone your palate. You should work on developing your palate, or so that you know what you like. Whiskey making, spend time understanding the distilleries, what makes them special, because every small process that goes behind whiskey making is what adds to the value of the distillery, or the perceived value or the reputation of the distillery, and hence the perceived value of the whiskey that is coming from that particular distillery. So it's very important to spend time understanding the practices that are followed and the history of these distilleries.
I understand, and good tips. Also, do you think duty free is overrated, or duty free are the place to go to for buying whiskey right now, or even any spirit for that matter?
See, I don't think duty free shops are overrated. I first started buying whiskeys on duty free, so obviously that's where in one go you see such a wide and diverse collection, and the salespeople at duty free are fairly well versed about whiskeys than when it comes to a lot of other stores. So having said that, if you're just starting off as a whiskey novice or starting a whiskey journey, duty free is a great place, but gradually, as you sort of start becoming an expert, or you start realizing what you like, what you don't like, I think over a period of time, duty free may not be the place where you will get whiskeys that will really add something new or different to your existing collection?
Also, I think duty free is a great place to buy some of the classics.
Yeah.
Because they are always available and pricing is competitive. So you should definitely check out for the pricing beforehand while you're traveling. Just do a little bit of research on the website. So that is one good tip. Second, what also happens is a lot of times, let's say when you're traveling, you end up trying a whiskey and then you are like, oh, whether I will get it or not somewhere else, should I buy it? For example, I was in Ireland in May and there were a lot of whiskies that I tried and there were a few that I wanted to buy. So what I quickly did is I checked at the Dublin duty free, what all is available. So whatever was available there, I did not buy those 2 bottles, but I bought the others which weren't available. So I think that a little bit of understanding of that helps. Also, as you progress, what you should always do is, let's say tomorrow if you're visiting a distillery or visiting a city like London or even in Europe where whiskey culture is obviously a lot more open than what you see in India, you will end up finding a lot of budget range whiskies which are very good, collectibles. Go to these shops like Whiskey Exchange, or even in Singapore there is LMDW. One is the staff there is highly knowledgeable. They can pretty much through the day talk you through every single bottle that's available in the shop.
And that will be like about 500 bottles at least.
Yeah.
That sounds great to have for sure.
And they also do a lot of their limited edition bottlings in collaboration with different distilleries that they work with. So those end up becoming like rare collectibles. And you don't have to break a bank to buy those. So yeah, I think you start with duty free, but slowly start exploring the places that you travel. You'll end up finding good whiskies.
So many like distilleries coming up across the world, right? Scotland now has about what, 150, more than 150 distilleries. US has about 1800 to 2000 distilleries if you factor in the craft whiskey distilleries. Ireland is again around 45 to 50 distilleries. So, there's so many distilleries around the world. I think one of the ways also is if you sort of have developed a liking for a particular style of whiskey, one way to look at building a collection is from upcoming distilleries. Try buying their first releases. Or, because let's say Isle of Harris, Hierarch is the distillery, right?
Yeah.
The whiskey that they released, the first bottle of that distillery. Isle of Rasse, again, a new distillery. Ardna Merchant, another new distillery. So any new distillery that comes up, try buying the first release. I think that, and also buy 2 bottles, one for your consumption and one for purely collectible, exactly. Because those first releases from these distilleries or special releases do appreciate significantly in value.
And also, like, what's the price difference? Would I expect like duty free to have a rate which is a bit lower than what I would find in India, or is that like a myth?
Like I know recently I saw Bombay duty free prices were more than especially for Indian whiskies, they were more than the Mumbai retail prices. So it varies because I don't think duty free has a concept of MRP.
Yeah, they don't.
So,
I mean, I think it's different in different countries.
Yeah.
But yes, on an average, duty-free prices are lesser than your retail prices because there is no duty levied.
Yeah.
So theoretically, they have to be lesser.
Got it. Also, what are some entry-level whiskies that I could get into? Like, I remember you mentioned a couple of them already, but still, like, to start off with, what are the entry-level Indian whiskies that I could get into?
Indian whiskies, I think Indri is all the rage. But I think there are some great additions, great whiskies from Paul John. There are a couple of Amrut releases which are not available in India but actually outside of India, which are great. I think you could start with that. And not only Indian whiskies, I think what you should also look at is what are good bourbons available, good Irish whiskies available. Irish whiskey is the fastest growing brown spirit in the world right now with so many new distilleries coming up. I think Irish whiskey is a very big range.
And I think Irish whiskies also, when it comes to price point, they're still not as expensive. All things equal, like in terms of quality, they're not as expensive as a Scotch whiskey. So, but I think also you should also look at picking up good blends. Like something like a Johnnie Walker Green Label is a fabulous whiskey for the price. You can also look at Dewar's Double range. I love that range. Dewar's Double 21 and 27, exceptional whiskies. So that you should look at. Definitely bourbon. Like for example, Woodford Reserve is something that I'll highly recommend. Michter's. When you're looking at building a whiskey collection, look at picking up bottles, cask strength whiskies. And cask strength whiskeys basically are whiskeys that are just taken from the cask. They don't get diluted with water and they get bottled. So these could range typically between 58 to 60, 62 odd %.
Right.
And they're not very expensive, especially if you look at the whiskeys such as Abulauer Abunna and Glenfarclas 105, two of the best examples of cask strength whiskeys. Again, also look at buying or getting whiskeys of diverse flavor profile, especially like, let's say pick up whiskeys that exemplify or a great example of whiskeys finished in sherry cask, whiskey that use peat, like you have your Kilhoman, Kolila, Port Ascaic. There's so many distilleries. Also, those flavor camps decide what is that you have started liking, and then build on those different flavor camps when you're collecting whiskey.
Also, one of the things you should explore is independent bottlers. While we don't have a lot of them in India, but
actually we don't have any in India, do we?
We have some Compass Box.
Discontinued now.
Yeah, but I mean we had it for a while, but we don't have any. Independent bottlers are essentially boutique agencies, or I would call it boutique bottlers who take the liquid from the distillers. Sometimes they also age it for a long time in their barrels and then they bottle it under their own brand names. So for example, there's Gordon MacPhail, there's Boutique Whiskey Company, there's Caden Heads. All of them have taken liquid from distilleries like Lafroig, Macallan, and a whole host of other.
I don't think Macallan is going to give, but yeah, I mean,
Caden Heads when started had taken,
they
took it from there, and Springbank. So you get a lot of these older brands of whiskies under the sub brand of an independent bottler, and they're very reasonably priced and very interesting expressions to collect.
So basically, they don't own the distillery, they don't make spirit. They buy spirit from different distillers and then they age it as per their own sort of what they feel like doing with the whiskey. So like they can take the same spirit and they give a very interesting spin to how a whiskey matured by an independent bottler or separate from the distillery will sort of taste. So I think independent bottlers, like some of the very old expressions of Glen Grant, are only available through Gordon and MacPhail and not through the Glen Grant distillery. So
that's quite interesting to have actually in your collection as well. But again, keeping that in mind, how do I make sure that the whiskey that I'm buying isn't a fake whiskey?
I think the best way to ensure that you're not buying fakes is buy it from reliable stores and outlets.
Also, I mean, just make sure that the label is proper.
Yeah.
The easiest way of faking it is like a small spelling change. So make sure that the brand name is correct and the cork is sealed properly. So I think these are some of the checks and balances that you need to do at the time of buying a whiskey. Most of the bigger retailers always keep original products because it's also their reputation at stake. I think that's something that you should keep in mind.